Okay. I have a few notes. Okay. So, it's been a long time since I've done this in front of real people. Carol and I did search a long time ago, which was peer ministry. So one of the things, just a few things I thought would be useful kind of to set it up, is in the first place, what you're doing here is peer ministry. It's not, you're not trained to be ministers that are, you know, like teaching and forming people that are far less knowledgeable and are possibly a lot younger or something like that. It's something where you're really trying to deal with everybody on a peer level, on kind of an even level. And you could do a whole other thing on that, where if you have somebody that comes to one of the retreats and they're really, really messed up and their life has really gone sideways, if you look at it as, oh, they're worse than I am or something like that, you know, it doesn't work very well, and it's not really a peer ministry type of approach. So in things like this, it's really, really important that we're real with each other. Because if you're, in the first place, you're depending on each other. You're depending on each other for support. We're depending on each other that if something goes wrong, that somebody else picks up the slack or solves. I mean, there's just a whole thing to team stuff. And it's really important that everybody is real in that. And we'll talk about some of the advantages of that for a group later. But I think pretty much everybody kind of goes, yeah, of course that makes sense. You know, if you've ever dealt with people who are really, really phony, I mean the extremes, you know that you really can't count on them. You don't know what they're going to do. But there's other ways of being phony than necessarily the ones that you might think of right away. So, first question. Okay, how many people in here have encountered somebody and thought, I don't know who they are? I mean, are they pretending? Or how many people have actually ever experienced that? Okay, I just want to make sure I was talking to people that were normal. So, okay, that's good. How can you tell, and you can look at this one of two ways. You can look at it as, how can you tell, the flies are just crazy. I don't know, I must have eaten something they like. How can you tell when somebody is real? How can you tell when somebody's phony? What's the first thing that comes to mind? You think of anything where it's like, oh man, this is the dead giveaway. Like when they won't look at you in the eye. I don't know. Anything? That's one.
I was going to say lack of eye contact, or sometimes their tone or pitch of voice.
Yeah. Sometimes people that lie really well will look you right in the eye the entire time because they've heard that, so then they'll do it more. So it's a little complicated. I know there's some show called Lie to Me about a guy that can actually tell or something. Anything else come to mind?
I just think sometimes people, what they talk about, that they don't talk about anything that is significant. They tend to talk about things that are very superficial.
Why do you think they do that?
Well, I would say it's probably because of defense mechanism, that if they reveal anything that's important, somebody might not like them.
Yeah.
Either for an opinion or something about themselves.
Yeah, they try to say things that are innocuous and not, you know, take a position, because if they take a position, somebody might disagree. And we'll get into why they do it and why we do it in a minute. Anything else?
The story changes.
Aha.
So when they talk to you about a topic, maybe they run into you again, and
Yeah.
it's like now it's like a different way that they achieve something, or they make it even bigger.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Inconsistency.
Yeah,
Exactly.
inconsistency.
So why would people not be authentic? And do you think it's fair to say that all of us, because I don't want to do a show of hands, because then one poor person might be very enough. I mean, do you think all of us have been fake at one time or another?
Yes, definitely.
I mean, so if that's the case, then that helps us to understand others. Because if we look at it and say, I'm always myself, I'm always authentic, I never fake it or anything, then it's like, well, I can't relate to that person, which means I'm actually less likely to recognize it when they do it. So the question is why? Why are people sometimes not authentic? Why do they hide? Why do they be somebody else or pretend not to be who they are?
Because they're afraid that
someone might not like who they really are.
John Powell wrote a book a long time ago that Carol let me borrow like 30-something years ago, called Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am? And the answer to the question is because you might not like me. So people hide who they are for that reason. What are some other reasons that, I mean, that's one, and that's kind of at the root of all of them. What's another one?
They don't like to be vulnerable with their emotions or feelings.
Okay, they don't want to be vulnerable. Yeah, they're hiding something that they feel, or they're hiding some part of themselves, maybe so it doesn't get hurt. Okay, that's good, that's good. What else?
Maybe because they want something. There's something that, in order to get it, they feel like they can't be fully honest and truthful.
Yeah, there's a guy that came door to door selling us dictionaries, which we bought. Years ago when our youngest daughter was pretty small, and one of the first things he says is, and bear in mind, she's like 2 years old, and he's going door to door selling dictionaries. He's maybe, I don't know, 20, 22, is from Nigeria, so he had a beautiful accent. And he says, "Oh, your daughter, she looks just like a model." She's 2. And of course he didn't know us, which is the dangerous thing on why they don't say to anything take a position, because he didn't know us. For us, that's not a positive. You know, the last thing I want is my daughter, you know, to necessarily be first thing somebody says is, "Oh, she looks like a model." You know, say she's intelligent, say she's cute, anything nice, polite, anything you want, but model too? Not what I was hoping for. Nothing wrong with being a model, just maybe not at 2 years old on the catwalk. So, okay. Now, some people, we'll leave that one go for a little bit. Some people will say that they're authentic when they really just don't have a filter. And we've run into this too. I'm thinking of a particular person I know, who shall go nameless. It's not Carol. It's not anybody in this room. But they just say whatever comes into mind. And if it's hurtful, they will still say it. And sometimes we have to say things that hurt somebody else because it's simply true and it needs to be said and there's no way around it. But that's not very often. But this is pretty much just whatever comes into his head, that's what he says. Is that being authentic? I mean, you've run into people like this, right? Everybody's been through this. Sometimes, do you think they're trying to keep people away or hide who they are by saying things that are outrageous? You know, or could that be a persona that they've got to, that my persona is, because we've all heard somebody say this, I've got no filter. I just say what I think. And sometimes that's an act. Sometimes it's an excuse for being kind of mean. So that doesn't necessarily mean that we're authentic just because we don't have a filter. Because we have a filter, we just don't filter certain things. Because you can bet they filter certain things. We're in the internet age. What else do we have? We have anonymity now. And when the internet first started up, everybody, the saying was, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. I mean, there was an actual cartoon that I remember seeing of this, and it was a dog with his paws on the keyboard. It was pretty cute. Because it could be taken two ways. So sometimes because we can hide more now, you know, there's a lot of online stuff that goes on and everything like that. That's a real chance to be inauthentic in a way that we can't do face to face. Because, you know, here, I mean, if I see you out in the market someplace and you're, you know, I don't know, in the beer aisle and you're popping the cans in the beer aisle at the market and swiggling them down, you know, you're the same person. I know you're the same person. You know, it's hard to hide that kind of behavior. Sorry to pick on you there. So being, you know, sometimes we have an opportunity to be inauthentic because we can hide in a way that we can't do in real life. So does that mean we do whatever we feel like if we're authentic? So if I'm really, really mad at Maria right now, that's Maria, she's my daughter. If I'm really, really mad at Maria right now and I don't show it, I am assuming I don't look angry at her right now. But if I were really angry at her and I'm controlling that, is that wrong? Am I being inauthentic because I'm not letting you know that I'm mad at her? Why not?
Because just because you're not making it an awkward situation for the rest of the group.
Yeah, for the sake of other people, I'm controlling it. But I could also be controlling it out of charity to her, because it would be, inappropriate to do that. I could also be controlling it out of duty to you, because I'm supposed to be talking to you about something, and that's not it. I'm not doing my job if I'm, using this to vent my anger. Have you ever had the experience of in prayer, like in a group prayer, where somebody would get out, like some issue out in the prayer and disguise it like they're talking to God, but they're really sending it over here? Yeah, I've had that. Oh Lord, please help Maria to stop being such a jerk. That kind of thing. It's really nasty. It's a horrible thing to do. And it's blasphemous, probably. So the thing is that if we want to control that emotion, if we want to control the anger, if we want to control our depression, if we are, whatever it is we're trying to control, if that's who we are, is a person that wants to control that and put the focus where it needs to be, we're trying to do the right thing, but we're not perfect, that's still authentic. We're not required to tell everybody how imperfect we are. You can pretty much bet that everybody in here is imperfect. That's a pretty good, reasonable bet. I'm not sure about Carol sometimes. I think very highly of Carol. But the point is sometimes there's a whole bunch of things that make us who we are, and controlling ourselves at times is part of that. And then we just have to work out, have we controlled it for the right reason? So when it comes down to being authentic, a lot of it is motivation. Why am I doing it? If I'm controlling my anger because I don't want you to think badly of me, that's not authentic. That's fake. Because now if I we're in a position, where I had to lead a lot of people, like I do management stuff, and when I do that, there are some things that I have to keep a kind of a management face for. I can't have any favorites. I can't, if I'm mad at somebody, I have to control it, partly out of respect for them and everybody else, but also because I can't look like a bad manager. That's a bad manager, and I'll work on controlling my issues with the person. So sometimes we have some things because of a role that we're in. Not a role like an actor, but a duty that we have to do, and the duty has to come first. And we do that. If you've ever had to work through grief, which sometimes we can do, sometimes we can't. I was going into a meeting once and got the call that my dad died right as I was going into the meeting. And I had to conduct the meeting and do it, and I just swallowed it and held for about an hour, got through the meeting and told my boss I thought I'd be okay making it through the day, and halfway through telling my boss that, I broke down. And then I had to leave. But I got through my meeting. I did my duty that I had to do. The other ones could be delayed, and they were, and that was okay. That's not being inauthentic. And part of that also is sometimes we don't want to burden the other person. In that meeting, everybody else doesn't need to know right then. It would have set the whole thing for the whole hour. Everybody would have had that hanging over their head. And I'm able to hold it in well enough, that it worked. Now, if I were a different person, I might not have. I might have said, you know what, I'm just canceling the meeting because I can't do this. And that would be okay too, because that would be me. Is this making sense so far? I did write some other stuff down, just rewards for inauthenticity, because I want to get through all that first. Some people just really need to be accepted. Not necessarily behavior. Is there anybody here who doesn't know what behavioral modification is? I'm guessing you got psychology at some point. The thing with the dog, that they rang the bell and the dog got fed, and then after that, if they rang the bell, the dog would start salivating even though it didn't necessarily have any food coming. We get behavioral modification from a very early age. We learn that if we smile and we're nice to mommy and daddy, that we get things. Sometimes. I do want to take a moment and talk about abuse and molestation. In the cases, for anybody in here or anybody you know that has had to deal with that, they will very often fake it a lot because they're trying to avoid being hurt. They're trying to deal with in dealing with the past, they learned that even when somebody did something horrible to them, that they had to act like it didn't happen. So they learned to fake. Very often you'll see that they'll be very critical of themselves. They can't take criticism, overly sensitive, really, really overly sensitive. Because of that, they'll fake it a lot and try to deal with stuff, and it becomes very difficult to hold. Have a lot of compassion for people like that. And if you've had to deal with that, be aware that it may be very hard for you to be real sometimes because you're still expecting it. I had a different experience. When I was a kid, I got beat up a lot. It took a lot of years. I mean, it took decades before I could disagree with somebody, especially a bigger, older male, and not expect him to hit me. I mean, it was just like I braced for it. Yeah, I'm a jerk, so I would disagree anyway. But I would brace myself and kind of flinch, and it was not a happy experience. So in the gospel, there's quite a few places where Jesus talks about hypocrites. And does anybody know what the word hypocrite actually refers to? I don't mean the behavior, I mean what the word actually really means. It means actor. Hippo, or hypo, under. It means they're talking from under a mask. The Greek actors used to wear a mask that had like a megaphone thing in it almost, that would amplify their voice or direct their voice better. So the idea is that to be a hypocrite is to be an actor. It's to speak from under a mask and not speak from authenticity, to not be authentic. I mean, one of the first ones that comes to mind is when Jesus says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. You know, don't go swearing, oh no, I swear, really it's this way, I promise it really is. No, it's this way. And if you're authentic, everybody will believe it immediately and they won't question it. In the work that I do, it's a very big deal that I get trust immediately. I mean, I have to be able to sit down with somebody for 3 minutes and they have to trust me with everything. And I honestly don't know how it works. I just know that it works, so I don't question it too much. But I think a lot of it's because I've only got one me. I tend to be pretty straightforward and stuff, and I don't know, I guess people pick up on it. So I don't think you have to really necessarily try to be authentic. You just need to check yourself out and be yourself, and then people will pick it up. Okay, so the hypocrisy thing. Okay, so another one. Does anybody remember in the book of Acts, there's a, oh no, I'm sorry, I guess it's in one of the letters. There's a part where Paul refers to a disagreement with Peter. So Paul was going out to the Gentiles, to the Gentile communities, and he was pretty much saying that you don't need to follow the law of Moses. You don't need to become Jewish to be Christian. If you're a Gentile, you just get baptized and you're a Christian. And there's a place where Paul says, no, it's not in Acts, I'm sorry, that Peter came out to a Gentile community and he would do the same thing Paul did. He would act like a Gentile and he would eat the same food and everything else, but then he went back with the Jewish people, with the Jewish Christians, and then he would kind of withdraw from that and follow the law of Moses more strictly. And Paul called him on it and said, you're living two lives. Now, there's a certain amount, even Paul says, you have to kind of get people where they are and kind of go with where you're at, and not necessarily, it's okay to adapt a little. But he called him on it. So it's that idea of being consistent, remember the consistency thing, being consistent all the time. It doesn't mean necessarily that I talk to everybody the same way. If I talk to a 7-year-old, it's different from talking to a 50-year-old. I'm going to say different things. I might use different vocabulary. There will be differences. But it should still be me. Make sense? What's the disadvantage to not being authentic? If you're not yourself, what's the disadvantage to it? Anybody?
I guess it can, if you're being not authentic, so people will like you. If you know you're not being authentic, then you know that they don't really like you. They like the image that you're giving them.
Okay.
So you can't really feel secure.
Oh yeah, you won't feel secure because you know they don't really like me. They just like me because I'm faking it. Yeah. If they really knew me, they wouldn't like me. Maybe we want people to like us too much, but that's another matter. What else? What's another disadvantage to not being authentic?
You might get lost in that. Like the person might get lost in that, switching back and forth or confusion.
Sometimes we call that context switching. I had a friend that was telling me that when she talked to her friend on the phone, that if her friend was talking to other friends at the same time, her friend would just sound stupid. She just couldn't communicate. And it was because in her group, they were all different with each other. So her friend was stuck because she's talking to two people at the same time, and she has to be two different people, but they can overhear each other. And we had a friend when we were young that was that way, that he was very proud of his ability to segment his life, to partition it out. And that partitioning is one of the disadvantages, because you have to try and keep all these different things going and not accidentally behave over here with group A the way you normally do with group B, because we end up being somebody different to different groups a lot of the time. Anything else?
Lose credibility.
Yeah, I mean, people don't trust you. If they catch you doing this kind of thing and realize that you're phony, then you just don't get any trust at all. It's really, really tough.
Kind of a little bit like what Linda was saying. I think that it's harder for us to understand and learn about who we are if we're spending a lot of time trying to be what others want us to be instead of who we are. And if we struggle with who we are, I think it makes it more difficult for us to understand who God is in our lives, and what His place is and what He wants of us in our life. If we struggle with who we are and get confused, kind of like what you were saying.
Yeah, we never get to figure out who we really are. And that's kind of a sad thing. A lot of the time, we're somebody else because we don't like who we are. There's a lot of self-judgment that goes on, self-criticism. And the problem is that sometimes some of the self-criticism is correct. There are things about all of us, I mean, not that I want to presume this, but certainly for me, there's a lot of things about me that I don't particularly like. However, they're me, and I try to own up to it. And if you said, wow, Ed, you're this way, it's like, well, yeah, it's true. There's not much I can really say to argue with it. But on the other hand, if we're beating ourselves up too much over it, we might decide to be somebody else so we can avoid the pain. Because sometimes it just hurts too much to be ourselves. And we just have to accept that. This is who we are. And if it's bad enough, well, then you do what you can to change. If you're in a loving community, hopefully we give each other the room to get it wrong and give each other support toward going right, and aren't too overly critical of each other. So let's talk a little bit about how to be authentic, and maybe you can go back and think about this later and kind of go, okay, am I really being straight with everybody? The first thing is our website that we do is Whitestone Journal, which I'm kind of getting back to doing now. And the name of it is based on Revelation 2:17, in which it says, God says, I will give him a white stone with his name inscribed upon it, known only to himself. So the idea is that we have an identity that's given to us by God. We're unique. And that identity is the identity. That's who we are. So being anything else is almost like telling God, I don't want to be who you made me to be. It's in a way, it's rejecting God's gift of ourselves. And we want to, we want to go with what we are because, frankly, that's the only thing we're ever going to be good at. We're never really going to be good at being somebody else. Does that make sense? Because that other thing doesn't exist. But you really exist. I mean, you can do yourself really well. So having a sense of identity really makes a big deal. Somebody said, I think certainly Carol did, that if you're going around faking all the time, then you don't really know who you are. You can also turn that around and say, if you know who you are, you probably won't fake it. I've never been in a position to be able to afford to pay somebody else to write my papers for me in school. And I went back to school in like 8 years ago. So I did have, I was in school, I was writing stuff. And if I had the money, I could get somebody to write a paper for me. I could have. And it's cheating, and people say, oh, it's not honest and everything else. But see, for me, I have a very strong sense of identity. If somebody else wrote my paper for me, then it's not me. And that bugs me. I would never want something with my name on it that I didn't write. I'd rather get a C on my own paper than to get an A buying one. And it isn't the money, and honestly, it isn't the honesty for me. It's because it's me. Now that I think about it, I could have grabbed that. It's a great passage in Man for All Seasons. If you haven't seen it, it's a really good movie. There's a part in there. If you have a strong sense of identity, if you really do think about that as a gift from God, then you're not going to try and be somebody else. Does that make sense, kind of? It's almost like it's such a priority at that point. But not everybody has a strong sense of identity. So when you're listening to other people, sometimes you'll find they're just still searching. And they can be 40 years old and still never have really settled down on who they are. I mean, it's a lot of people drift through life without ever knowing. Values is another thing, and certainly within the church, values are a pretty big deal. I mean, there's the 10 Commandments, okay? There's a lot of church teaching, a lot of Catholic moral teaching. All that is values. And if you have rock solid values and you're sure about them, then it tends to drive authenticity. Because like early on, the thing, well, they don't talk about much. They kind of talk about inane topics and just sort of keep it sort of general. But if you have values, you take a position. You'll have the situation when you're on, I don't know what they call it here, on tables with people when do you call them seniors and juniors here? But if you're talking with people that are making the retreat, there's times where if you take a particular position, they may not like it. They may walk out. I mean, you better be right, and it better be said with love, and there's a whole lot of other important things to say. But there are some things that just aren't going to change. It doesn't matter who's Pope. They're not going to change. And that's just who we are. That's back to identity as a group even. We have an identity as a group. So having values drives authenticity because in expressing those, we have some consistency. And it helps make us one person. If you have a group of friends that are really pro-abortion, and you soften, and softening is one thing, but if you go back on it and say, well, it's okay with that group, but then you come over here to the meeting and go, oh no, it's horrible, that's hypocrisy, but it's also not really sticking to the values. You're going against the values in one group to score points and to be accepted. Sometimes it's better to be rejected. Okay, knowing ourselves is really important. And it's amazing that some people, a lot, still just don't know themselves. If you do something strange, if you surprise somebody in a bad way, and they say, I can't believe you did that, that should always cause a question. Why did I do that? What do I not know something about myself? I have a temper, and sometimes something will really make me fly off the handle. And I'm just shocked at myself, and it's like, my God, and sometimes I'll have a reason, but when I look at it, I think, no, this was out of proportion to the actual thing, and it doesn't make any sense. And then I have to really look at it and say, what's wrong with me? Why did I do this? I don't know. I didn't do this the other time. Why this time? And try to understand ourselves. If we understand ourselves, it brings a certain consistency too. Another thing is humility. And in thinking about humility, the first thing that people tend to think is that it means thinking poorly of ourselves. I'm really not that great. And then you say, oh, you're just being humble. No, actually, if I say that I'm not being humble, I'm actually making a judgment on myself, which we're not supposed to do, by the way, in case you didn't know. Never supposed to judge yourself. You can judge your actions to some degree. You can say, well, that was a bad thing to do. But that's not the same thing. In humility, it really just means being very, very honest about who we are and everything surrounding ourselves. And that kind of honesty brings consistency. It brings knowledge of the self and tends to make us more authentic. We don't need to pretend. Humility is like the opposite of pretending. It's just going, this is who I am. And like it or not, or whatever it is, this is who I am. And frankly, I'd like to change this part. And being open about that. Does that mean that we're required to tell everybody our faults? When I met Kathy for the first time, I didn't necessarily give her a long list. We didn't have that kind of time. Here are all my faults, categories here. sometimes in the course of giving a talk or something, I will say, this is an area I have a problem with, so that I can just clear it, and everybody kind of knows I'm not talking from a position of strength, I'm talking from a position of weakness. I'm telling you about this because I've had a problem with it. There's other things that I'm very good at, and I probably won't say, I'm telling you this because I'm really good at it. Although in this case, I think it's probably fair to say that I'm pretty authentic. The people that know me, I don't know. It's like, I'm not terribly loud, am I, Ricky? I mean, you know, I sang in your ear the other night, but it wasn't too loud. Poor guy. That could sound wrong. Anyway, and also being real with yourself, which is kind of humility and integrity. But sometimes we kid ourselves to make us do things. You know, we kind of, oh, it's not that bad, or, well, I'm not going to study now. I'll be able to study later. You know, I mean, there's just little lies that we tell ourselves, and every time we lie to ourselves, we're encouraging ourselves to be fake. Because if you can lie to yourself, you're sure going to lie to somebody else, right? I mean, it's pretty rare that we lie to ourselves and tell everybody else the truth, because that would be really weird. Because then we couldn't listen to ourselves when we told other people things. What's the first thing that most angels say when they appear? One of two things.
Peace be with you.
Peace is one,
Don't be afraid.
and don't be afraid. Exactly. Fear not. Okay, so fear is a big, big reason for not being authentic. Because we have to fake it, because if we don't, we're afraid of the consequences. If I told you what I really think, I couldn't get you to do what I want you to do. If you really knew me, Tom, I don't know. You might not like me very much.
I doubt
Yeah, you might not like me. Believe me, I could. Oh, gosh, it's a good thing you don't. But you know, it's a lot of it's fear, and I'll tell you, there is nothing that's more our enemy than fear. And I could do 6 different talks, and it would end the same way every time. Fear not, because if you're afraid, you're sunk. You're in a weak position. There's nothing weaker than being afraid. And I don't mean that in a condemning way. I mean, it's really bad. So I have a story that I wasn't going to tell, but I'll tell it anyway. And it's really embarrassing. But I think it's a good point. So there's a saying that says, fake it till you make it. I kind of hate it, but I kind of appreciate it, you know? It's kind of like, because fake it? Don't like that very much. But anyway, when I was 14, 15 years old and really stupid, I got into riding horses. And I had a really crazy horse that I got. My family bought the horse for $150. If you know anything about horses, I mean, that was really cheap even back then. The horse had been abused and beaten and needed a lot of work. And I was working on her. But she frequently would just take off running when I was on her. And it was a frightening experience. I was going in a race one time, and she actually took off sideways, jumped over the fence of the racing track, and went plunging down some hill. I was still on her, and it took a while to get her under control. It was actually because I fed her the wrong food. So the point is, I was coming in from this far field. I grew up where there were some hills and stuff like that, but it was still kind of city. And I'm coming in, and they had a fence that was, or a gate that was an aluminum gate that stretched, you know, twice this. And it was between 2 telephone poles that had been stuck in the ground that were tar covered, you know, creosote covered. And they used, they often would take the barbed wire for the fences and they just wrap it around the poles. So these 2 massive poles with barbed wire wrapped around them and an aluminum gate which happened to be open. And you always feared nicking that gate as you're going through. So my horse decided to take off because she was going toward the stables. She really wanted to go home and just chill. And so she's going, and the ground is kind of hard there, and there's like, it was a really, not a great place. There's like broken glass around and stuff, and I'm thinking, I don't really want to fall here. And the girl that I really liked at the time, that I never went out with, was sitting on top of one of the poles, one of the places around there. and I did not want to look bad. So, that's a pretty good rider. I sat up straight. I was bareback, I didn't tell you that. I was bareback. And I sat up straight and did all my stuff just right, had my hands in the right place and everything, and just shot the gap and figured, you know what? If I die, I'm going to die looking good. Pure vanity. I mean, it's not being authentic, you know. But what's interesting is I stayed on and eventually got her to slow down, and I came out of it okay. And a lot of it was because my desire to look good was greater than my fear. Now that's, don't take this the wrong way. I'm not recommending vanity. Just replace all your vanity with all your fear with vanity and you'll be fine. No, that's not the point. But the point is that because, I think honestly, because I had less fear and that my mind was someplace else and I had a motivation, not a very good one, but I had a motivation, you know, that made me able to deal with it better. If I had been really, really afraid, you know, it would have been a lot harder to stay on. I don't have great balance anyway, and the more I try to think about it, the worse it is. It's better if I don't concentrate on it. Does that make sense? So fear is a really, really big deal, and watch out for that. And then the other thing is just basically, and this is really hard, is just not needing other people's acceptance that much. Going back to Man for All Seasons, there's a place where Thomas More is talking to Richard Rich, who turns out to, in the end, to lie about what he said and ends up getting his head cut off. But Richard Rich is going the wrong way, and he says, Rich, you should be a teacher. Just go be a teacher. And he says, if I go be a teacher, who's going to know? And he says, you'll know. Your students will know. God will know. That's not a bad audience. So when it comes to acceptance, we can look first for acceptance from God. God accepts us, he loves us, certainly. But am I being who you see me as? Because whatever God sees is the truth, right? You can't lie to God. I mean, I'd like to think sometimes he doesn't see half of what goes on in this weird head of mine. But the fact is, he does. He sees everything. And he sees it exactly as it is. Seeing is almost the wrong word to use. He knows. So trying to fool God is just stupid. Sorry. No filter. But the point is that whatever we are before God is what we are. And the more the way we see ourselves, the closer that is to the way God sees us, the better. The closer that everybody else sees us to the way God sees us is better. However, that's harder. And one of the things that goes along with that is, if we worry about whether people accept us, remember, who I pick on this time? Freddie. Do you really know what I think of you? You really don't. And if you think I accept you, do you really know? If you think I don't accept you, do you really know? See the point? We really don't know what's in other people's heads. So when we try to worry about what other people think of us, it's like a double thing. In the first place, we're worried not with what they really think, but with what they appear to think, since we don't really know. So we could be going one direction and going, oh, I'm going to make this appearance to you, but you could interpret it some entirely different way, and I won't even know. You might hide it from me, or I might just not be able to read it, because that's the way it works. Sometimes somebody communicates very clearly with us, and we just don't see it. I'm really bad at that. Sometimes I just have no clue. Are you nodding because you're going, yeah, you're right, Ed, you really have no clue?
No, I'm not even because I know what you're talking about.
So yeah, and you know, we can drive ourselves crazy with insecurity over that. You know, if you think about that, you can either say, wait a minute, if I don't really know what anybody thinks, I'm really going to freak out. Or you can say, I don't really know what everybody thinks, so I'm just going to have to do what I think is right and be myself and go for it. Anyway, that is just about everything I had. Hopefully, was this somewhat useful? Different? Thoughts, questions? Do we allow time for questions past that?
We have another 5 minutes.
Okay. 5 minutes of questions. Anything come to mind you think, oh wait, what about this?
My first thought is, what if I get someone like that at a retreat? Because I've been on 2 confirmation retreats, and I've had a student that has no filter, and
Oh,
just
yeah.
starts talking about all sorts of stuff, and I'm like, how do I not be rude and kind of change the conversation or the topic so the rest of the group doesn't start asking questions and stuff, you know?
Yeah, that's why you have these meetings and that's why you're here. You can figure that out.
So that's the first thing I thought right now. I'm like, oh my gosh, a person with no filter or a person who doesn't want to really share, not because they're being quiet, but because they're not staying on track with what you're talking about. Or who knows.
But you know, my mother always used to say, watch out for the quiet ones.
That's
Also
true.
remember, and I've had this experience and it's been really sad, sometimes there's people that want to please you so much, and if they think you're a leader of any kind, they want to please you. And whatever you come up with, they will agree. And you'll go, wow, I'm making a convert. You know, this is so great. And then they might not be Catholic, they go into RCIA, this could be somebody you work with or go to school with or something, and you're so proud of yourself, I've made another convert. But in fact, they just are a pleaser. They don't know how to say no. They don't know how to argue. They can't do anything. And they will come away from you an ardent Catholic. And then they'll go over to their friend that's an atheist and hang out at Starbucks, and all of a sudden they're an ardent atheist. You know, and it's just like, I know somebody that told me about a friend. He said he just keeps changing. He just goes through all these different phases. But he's going through phases, that's different. But there's some people that just, whatever crowd they're with, that's who they are. And I don't know if you'll be shocked at it, because maybe you've already seen it. But watch out for the ones that agree with you. People that agree with me make me more nervous than the people that will argue with me, or people with no filter. Because the people that agree with me are probably not telling me the truth. I think it's a fair bet anybody agrees with me. But really watch that, because they're telling us what we want to hear. When we hear what we want to hear, we're just so happy and so clueless. Something to think about too. That's good. What else? Any other thing come to mind? Open up your filter.
Just when you were talking about people who change, I knew some girl in high school who was actually doing that same thing. She was telling me, oh yeah, you know, I want to be Catholic, I want to do this, and I'm like, okay, you know, I'm ready, like, I'll help you, whatever you need, let me know.
Yeah.
And then she talked to my other friend who's, you know, Protestant, and she was like, oh yeah, you know, I want to go to church with you, let's go. And then, you know, finally, I think she got sick and tired of agreeing with us and putting on this mask that she stopped talking to most of us completely, and especially myself. And then I find out she ends up getting married and converting to Islam.
There you
And
go.
it was like, wait a minute, weren't you telling me one thing? And then I talked to the Protestant friend, and she's like, well, she was telling me something else. I'm like, who was she really? We don't know.
But have compassion, because people are really struggling. Anybody here ever read the Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury? There's a piece in that where there's a Martian, a real Martian, that they have the ability to take on the shape and the appearance of other people. And it's somebody, not that's near them, somebody that somebody's thinking about. So if you have a favorite uncle or something, they would look like the favorite uncle when they're around you. But when they're around somebody else, they look like somebody's great aunt. So the problem is that there's a point where a crowd gathers around the Martian because they've cornered him. And he's stuck there, and there's like 30 people around him. And he keeps changing. He keeps changing through all the different thoughts and changing form until it wears him out and he dies. Just from exhaustion. And I can tell you, the people I've known that were chameleons that just changed like that, the stress is enormous. So have compassion, which is always compassion. Don't judge them. Look at it and say, you poor thing, even if you don't actually tell them that. But think, you know, they're suffering. It's really hard. It's really, really hard. to do that. Let's see, I probably didn't cover everything.
So, this is hard. So, I am very worried about being a leader
Uh-huh.
because I've never done it,
Mhm.
and secondly because I feel that I can't really connect with people. I'm much older than most people here, like maybe 15 years older. So
Mhm.
I don't feel that we can connect, and I guess it's my own insecurity, but just because I am much older, I have different life experiences, so it's hard for me to be authentic when I know I'm talking to a 19-year-old who doesn't understand kind of me, because I'm 35 years old, and they have different kind of like an adult or whatever, so
Mhm.
that's what worries me about this whole process, to be honest with you.
That's
And
just-
how am I authentic when you want people to talk to you and open up, but how can you relate to them when you're not like them at all?
And the trick is two things. One of them is to be honest and humble about it as you're being. And secondly is to think about the things that are the same. In the Catholic Church's teaching, and bear in mind, I don't know about you, Tom, and don't answer, but I think I'm older than anybody here, but you might, it's possible we might be the same, I don't know. Let's not talk about it.
Very possible.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Okay. Because I'm used to being the oldest person in the room. I'm used to being double the age of anybody else in the room. And I get along just fine. Right, Ricky? Oh, thanks for that vote of confidence. Yeah, I get along pretty well with them. There are certain, and I would love to take a few minutes and I could tell you some helpful hints. But there are a few phrases that, in fact, you don't need me for. Some of the younger people could tell you what they hate to hear. And since you're in a loving community here, people here that are younger can tell you the things they hate to hear out of somebody older. I'll tell you, that's so valuable. That is such a gift. And it takes openness and being authentic to get them to tell you. Because they have to be trusting you enough that you won't be offended, and you have to take it with graciousness. But the second thing is that, just being open like that and saying, you know what, you just have to be kind of careful how you say it. And putting things in a way that doesn't offend the other person is not being inauthentic, unless we're doing it for the wrong reason, or, and this is the thing we have to be careful of, or unless we're being patronizing. Because younger people here, you hate being patronized. How many people have felt that? Okay. So have I ever been patronized by a younger person? Yes. Anybody saw my video? That was kind of like that, you know? So the point is that there are things that we don't say. It's not being fake. It's just some things are really, really rude. I'm sorry. Briefly, in the Catholic Church, there are 2 ages. Somebody want to say what those 2 ages are? Come on. All right, Maria, go for it. You know. Pressure's on.
There are 2 different thoughts in my head. I don't know which one is right.
Well, it's 2 answers. It's 2 answers.
I have like 4 answers.
Oh, no. This is getting needlessly
We'll say
confusing.
all of them, because I'd be interested.
It's
I was thinking either before the age of reason and after,
infant and adult.
or alive in this world, or dead and alive in heaven.
Okay. But, good point. But no, I was looking for infant and adult. So, everybody in here, all right, well, let's put it the other way around. How old is he? 5. Okay, he counts as infant, sorry. Before the age of reason. Everybody else in here is an adult. And they are, and you have to repeat this to yourself, they are equal, we are all equal in dignity before God. And it doesn't matter about the experience. The experience has, in the first place, experience is only as good as our ability to interpret it. So if I have lots of experience, but I'm still the same dumb guy I was when I was 4 years old, and is that a little bit of self-revelation? Then what good is my experience? What did I do with my experience? Am I wiser? The wiser I am, the more burden there is on me to deal with everybody in a good way. It's not like an automatic, I get a pass. So, speaking as somebody that is usually older than everybody in the room, and has spent a lot of time with younger people, there are certain techniques and things that are probably more things to be mindful of. But if you have humility and a desire to serve, and if you truly love, and if you completely agree with the church that we're all equal in dignity before God, it works itself out. Does that help?
Yeah, and the other thing I was gonna say is, especially in our situation where we're peers, as far as, not completely peers being because some are older, some are younger, but peers in that we're all here together for the same purpose, which is to grow in our faith, in our love for God and for one another. Our sharing of ourselves is more about sharing what's going on inside rather than what our experience is. It's more about the experience inside than the experience outside. So for people that have gone to college and have a advanced degree, and someone who never went to college and stayed home and raised a family, their experience is so different. However, the experience of the heart is not different. We all experience loneliness and fear and are afraid of not being accepted. We all desire love. We all are insecure. I mean, all of the things that go on inside in our internal life, it's the same. Even though we have different life experience, the heart experience is not different. And that's what you will appeal to in sharing with a group of people that seem to have such a different experience. Because they do on the outside, but on the inside, we're all the same. You know, we all are seeking a relationship, well, we hope that we're all seeking a closer relationship with God. And we all have, you know, one of the things that we do share in common as far as experience is we all have gone through the maturing process of childhood. And that's one thing that it's always fascinating to me when I think about the fact that we all hold on to those experiences in childhood. No matter how old we are, we always think about when we were a kid, and often feel like we felt when we were a kid. I mean, and again, we can all relate to that. So I don't know if that helps, but.
Yeah, thank you.
I think by being comfortable enough to share who you are with someone else, everything, all your good points and bad points, that is true authenticity. I mean, you're risking that's scary. And to share that, and people get that. Some people abuse it, some people will accept it. The ones that accept it are getting a great gift, because God does not make any junk.
So recapping and then following up with that. To be authentic, know your identity, stick to it. Know your values, know yourself, have humility, be real with yourself. Have no fear, don't worry about acceptance. And above all, remember that if you are truly authentic, if you're really yourself with everyone, then you'll have more in common with everyone and be able to communicate with everyone. Because the closer you get to who you really are, the more you're like everybody else. Because at the core, we're all the same. As the great gospel blues song says, we're all meat from the same bone. David Clayton Thomas, if anybody, remember him? Blood, Sweat, and Tears? Okay, so thank you. I hope that was worthwhile.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
What's next?
So I was just going to